Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome each and every one of you to a new League of Legends video. So today I wanted to take an early look as to what is currently happening on the PvE and just take a look at what exactly Riot is doing, because keep in mind the massive preseason changes are on the PvE right now. So with that, there are a ridiculous amount of changes, probably more changes than we've ever had on the PvE thus far. Now for this video, I will not be going over all of the runes and talking about the different types of runes and all that stuff, because I have already talked about it in other videos, and I'll talk about it a bit more once we do the final patch rundown when it's about to hit the live servers. Keep in mind the preseason patch is not hitting until early November, I believe, but taking an early look into the current PvE cycle, literally every single champion in League of Legends is receiving a change, most of it being a buff. So without much further ado, let's just jump right into the video because there's a lot to discuss. Now, some of you may be wondering, why is there literally a change to every single champion? Well, the reason for that is because the rune system is completely changed. You're no longer going to have those flat pages that give you flat MR or HP or armor or whatever you want it to do, flat AD, flat lethality, etc. So since that is no longer a thing, a lot of the champions have had a lot of differences, right? I mean, some champions that would excel at maybe penetrating through armor, so naturally if you face that champion, let's say in the mid lane, you would stack flat MR blues. But since you can no longer do that, that champion could be too strong, or the other champion could be too weak, or the champion cannot be doing as much damage anymore since you can't get flat AD reds or something like that. So Riot has to buff and change all of the champions to kind of meet the new criteria on what kind of the average damage a champion should do at the average level. And that is the reason for all of these changes that I'll be talking about, because again, there are a lot of changes, literally over 100. Now, obviously, I categorize this in a very specific way as to not go over literally every single 138 changes, because most of them are, of course, quite small. So here are the categories. There's going to be two main categories, one being the champions that actually got buffed, and the other one being the champions that got nerfed. And within each of those two categories, the buffed and nerfed categories, there'll be two subcategories, one of which is the champions that only had the base stats change, whether that's a buff or a nerf, and the other category being to champions that had not only base stats, but also a change to one or more of their abilities. Now again, since I'm not going over every single one, to give you a rough idea, almost every single champion had about a rough 10 extra base damage, whether it's to their damage overall to abilities, whether it's to their just maybe flat HP, maybe it's to their flat HP regeneration increase, maybe it's to their flat armor or MR gained or even lost, and things like that. It's just to give you a rough idea, since I'm not going over every single one in specifics, but if you want to check it out for yourself or check out your main champion, I'll have a link to it down below. So getting this party started, let's go over first the list of champions that got buffed only to their base stats. Now right now on your screen, you can see the list of those champions which have only had their base numbers change, most of them being only about 10. Now again, some of them are different than others. So for instance, someone like Fiddlesticks had his base armor increase from 20.88 up to 29.88, so 9 increase. While someone like Ari had her HP growth increase from 80 to 92, so 12, but her base HP also got increased from 514.4 to 526.4, so extra 12. Again, it's all going to be these kind of changes to most of these champions, and the next list we'll talk about are going to be the champions that got changed also with the base stats plus some abilities. Now for this one, I'll be a little bit more specific. So for now, you can see the champions on your screen on which got changed for their base stats being buffed, and also most of them having their abilities buffed, with very few exceptions, which I'll talk about in a bit. Much like the base stats, most of these abilities that got buffed also had only about an average of 10 increase in damage, or if it's a nerf, about a 10 decrease in damage, all to accommodate the way the new rune system is going to work. So for instance, Aatrox's W and E ability both had its damage increased by 5 at every single rank. Again, not too much, and it's not some substantial buff, just a tad to put him on a perfect scale. Brand's W got buffed, Braum's W got buffed as well, Camille's W and her E ability got buffed, Corki's Q ability got buffed, Draven's Q and E ability got buffed, but then we have Echo, which is a much bigger of a change. Like I said, since most people are just getting a slight number tweak to most of their abilities and base stats, Echo actually got a massive change to his passive, where now it states a new effect: damage is doubled against the monsters. So what does this mean? Well, obviously jungle Echo seems to be a thing once again. It seems like Riot is trying to throw him back into the jungle and make him viable there, on top of also being still most likely viable whether you're playing him mid lane or top lane. But keep in mind, the extra damage against monsters is only to his passive. Not all of his abilities do double damage to monsters, just the passive, but that's still a pretty decent buff regardless. Following that, we have a buff happening to Ezreal's E, Fiora's Q, Graves' Q, Hecarim's Q and E, Jarvan's Q ability, Jax's Q ability and his E ability, Jace's Q and E, Kane's Q and W, Kha'Zix's Q and W, Kindred's Q and W, Kled's Q, W and E, Lee Sin's Q and E, but only the first part of both of those abilities, not the second part. Lucian's Q and Nocturne's Q both got buffed, Pantheon's Q and E got buffed, Poppy's Q and E, and then we have Rammus that got a bit of both, where his W got the buff on the armor bonus that it offers. However, it actually got a nerf with how much MR it now offers as well. Following that, we have a buff to Rek'Sai's QW, Renekton's QE, Rengar's QE, Riven's WE, Shaco's E, Talon's QW, Tarik's E, Tristana's E, Trinimir's E, Varus Vayne Wukong's E, Xayah QE, Zin's QE, and Zed's QE. So those are the champions that got buffed, whether it's just to their base stats, again being somewhat minor, around, give or take 10, or it was also to champions that got abilities buffed on top of also getting their base stats buffed to a certain extent. And even though I already mentioned there is some changes that happen to champions that are actually a nerf. Now you'll notice most of them are in fact buffs, but there's exactly 5 that I want to specify that were nerfed instead of actually getting buffed. But usually for most of them, they also did get buffed in some aspects, but in others, they got nerfed as well. Either way, the list is as follows. Now, Olaf is the only champion that got his base stats nerfed. More specifically, his base AD was lowered. But following this, we have Azir's Q that got nerfed. We have Evelyn's Q that got nerfed. Rammus's W that offers bonus magic resistance also got nerfed, which I did talk about earlier. And Sejuani actually received the biggest amount of nerfs of all the champions. Because not only have her base stats been nerfed, the base MR, the MR growth, the armor growth, all being nerfed, but her E ability also got nerfed as well, being the only champion to receive this many nerfs on top of also having her base stats plus one of her basic abilities nerfed as well altogether. So like I said at the beginning, this patch's main goal is to make every champion in line with how the new rune system is going to work, since no longer will you have those rune pages that give you base stats, scaling stats, you'll have specific MR or armor or whatever, or even base AD or base lethality based on your matchup and what you're facing. And of course, certain champions will just naturally be stronger than others. So for instance, someone maybe like Zed or Talon, they'll have a lot more advantages now, since you can't just go ahead and run a bunch of flat armor yellows against them in the laning phase, and you just feel a lot more, I guess, protected. So that's one example as to why these changes have to come in for literally every single champion to make everything a bit more fair and on equal playing ground, since you won't be able to have those flat out specific runes. Most of them being buffed to their base stats, some of them also being buffed to their base stats plus certain abilities, while others being nerfed to just their base stats, while others, especially Sejuani, being nerfed to the base stats and even some abilities. But it makes sense because Sejuani is just way too strong regardless. But we are not done just yet, because there's still a few more things I want to talk about while we're taking this early look as to what is currently happening on the PvE server, specifically with the massive preseason changes. So first, we essentially have a new item in League of Legends. It is called the Stopwatch, and there's 2 ways of obtaining it. The first of which is just simply buying it for 600 gold, and the active effect of this item gives you essentially what Zhonya's Hourglass does with this active effect, but a one-time use only. Or you can spec into the inspiration runes, and instead you can get the Stopwatch completely for free at the beginning of the game. Now the Stopwatch, even though it is a new item, obviously has more purposes than just being a random 600 gold one-time Zhonya's active effect item, because this actually builds into 3 items now, essentially giving 3 current items that we know and love new recipes. One of them is being the Zhonya's Hourglass, which now builds out of the same items but plus the Stopwatch. Next we have Guardian's Angel, which somewhat oddly enough also builds out a Stopwatch now, the rest being the same, followed by also Gargoyle Stoneplate. So new item plus 3 current items having new recipes that build out of the new item being Stopwatch. And the last thing I want to quickly talk about is essentially somewhat of a rework happening to these starting jungle items, the Hunter's Machete and the Hunter's Talisman. The Hunter's Machete now has a new effect to it where it grants 15% bonus attack speed for 2 seconds, but proccing once you do basic attacks versus monsters. And Hunter's Talisman now has a unique passive, which is essentially a new effect as well, where it now burns monsters for 20 plus 30% of your bonus health, maximum being 50 as magical damage. So it's very clear and obvious as to which type of champions the Hunter's Machete and the Hunter's Talisman are now geared towards, the Machete being towards auto-attacking, kind of a little bit more AD damage-focused champions, while the Talisman is more focused towards champions that want to build more HP and just tankiness in general. But either way guys, there you have it, massive changes on the PvE server. Literally every single champion, all 137 or 8 of them being changed, some of them much more than others, but it's all to kind of accompany how the new rune system is going to work. Now rather than going through literally every single champion, I thought that would be extremely boring. I tried to categorize it and make it a bit more easier, I guess, to digest for you guys. So let me know down below what you think of this current patch, what you think of the preseason changes. Again, there's probably going to be even more things coming along the lines. Just keep in mind that literally every champion will get changed at the end of the day, whether it's going to be what you see at the moment or if it's going to be slightly different when the patch finally does hit the live servers. But if you guys enjoyed this video, then definitely hit that like button to show your support. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you for the next video. Peace.